just on vacation.
So we just hung out.
Welcome, and thank you for attending this evening. My name is Tatiana Valentine, and I'm president of the Board of Aldermen. Today, on behalf of the Board of Aldermen and my colleagues who are here this evening, I express our shared hope of recovery as we attend this memorial gathering and overdose awareness ceremony. 32 years ago, I became friends with John, who's an addict. Early on in our friendship, he told me he was an addict. I was surprised, not that he was an addict, but rather because at this point in my young adult life, I rarely met someone who admitted to their addictions. My one friend, John, altered who I became. I learned from John, taking the first step takes courage, and that it's up to us. I learned from John that he drew strength from his community of friends. I thank you, our community of friends, and the Ryan Harrington Foundation for strengthening our community by being here today to show support. And I'd like to read a poem, which the Harrington Foundation introduced me to, by poet Mariam Kazem. It's called Just One. One song can spark a moment. One flower can wake a dream. One tree can start a forest. One bird can herald spring. One smile begins a friendship. One hand clap lifts a soul. One star can guide a ship at the sea. One vote can change a nation. One sunbeam lights a room. One candle wipes all the darkness. One laugh will conquer gloom. One step must start each journey. One word must start each prayer. One hope will raise our spirits. One touch can show you care. One voice can speak with wisdom. Our heart can know what's true. One life can make a difference. You see, it's up to you. Thank you. And I'd like to introduce Pastor Harris.
Good evening. My name is Jordan Harris. I am the newly appointed pastor at Connection in East Somerville, and I want to thank you all so much for being here tonight. Tonight, we gather to remember the 156 lives that our community has lost this year to overdose and struggles with addiction. Tonight, we gather to place purple flags, speak their names, and honor their struggles as a sign and a witness of compassion and love. Tonight, we remember and place flags for our sisters and brothers, for our children and family members. And beloved, I just have to say that in our remembrance, there is deep grief. In our remembrance, there is a deep pain because nights like tonight shouldn't have to happen. You see, I can't shake the feeling that we shouldn't have to be here tonight, that there shouldn't be so many purple flags to place. I don't want to believe that this struggle against addiction and substance abuse and accidental overdose has grown so much that we are now embarking on a whole month worth of work to raise awareness. But it has, and we are. And there are 167 lives that this community has lost to this crisis we are now facing. You see, we are facing a crisis in our communities and our homes. People, real people with stories and potential. People, real people who are loved and who were born. People, real people with hopes and dreams have lost their lives to this crisis. Beloved, tonight, we gather to remember. And in our remembrance, there may be deep grief and pain, feelings of guilt and shame, feelings that we have failed our city, failed our family, failed in our responsibility to care for one another. And I have to name those feelings. I have to name the frustration and confusion that comes along with moments like this. And beloved, I feel compelled to name someone that I lost to his addiction. Not this year, but a couple of years ago. His name was Elliot. And I remember Elliot. He came to the church. He was looking for something to eat. He said that he had just woke up from sleeping off a high, and he was starving. I remember that Elliot felt comfortable because of the rainbow flag in the church and started to open up about himself. He talked about his struggles with homelessness, his family kicking him out. He talked about the homophobic things that were said to him. Elliot talked about his struggles with his mental health and how all of this eventually led him to heroin. He was 23. I remember the track marks on his arm, and I remember the first and the second time he told me that he wanted to get clean. I also remember he was the first one who started calling me Little Pastor, and I remember how much I hated him for that nickname. I remember the first time Elliot missed an appointment. At that point, he was doing an outpatient program and had been clean for a couple of weeks. We were going to go talk with his caseworker about a new housing opportunity we thought that he could apply for, and Elliot never showed up. I remember how it was another 6 days until we heard that he had relapsed and accidentally overdosed. Rather than sad, I remember being angry. I remember feeling so frustrated at myself and the other care providers. I remember staying awake at night trying to figure out what had gone wrong. I remember trying to figure out just who it was to blame. You see, the intersectionality of Elliot's struggle meant that there was a whole host of folks who played a role in his attempt at recovery, and I wanted someone to blame and point the finger at. And it would be years later, many years later, that I would learn that the notions like blame and assigning guilt, while normal feelings, are ultimately insignificant and meritless and nothing in comparison to what I really felt for Elliot, which was grief. I grieved his loss because I saw how much potential and life he had. I saw that he had been working so very hard against all of these overwhelming pressures. I grieved all that he wouldn't have the chance to do and to become. I grieved because I thought it was going to be an easy road to recovery for Elliot, but I didn't understand, and it went wrong. And if Elliot's loss has taught me anything these years later, it is this: we cannot give up. That we must continue this work. That we must work hard and even harder to rescue those in our community and in our families struggling with addiction and substance abuse. You see, we cannot give up because there are people, real people, with stories and potential. People, real people who we love and who are born with inherent worth and value. People, real people, with hopes and dreams fighting for their lives against addiction this very night. Tonight, we gather to remember, and in our remembrance, we can find strength to keep on keeping on. In our remembrance, we can find the grace necessary to eradicate the stigma that goes along with seeking help. In our remembrance, we can find even more compassion. We can find the determination to keep fighting for those who struggle, to fight for themselves. In our remembrance, we can find hope. And we can find hope that there will never be this many purple flags to place again. Indeed, we look forward to the day when we don't have to gather here to memorialize. Rather, we gather here to celebrate. When addiction and substance abuse are no longer problems we are presently facing. Rather, they are problems that our community has overcome. Beloved, tonight, we place 157 purple flags for the lives that our community has lost this year to overdose and to struggles with addiction. But I implore you, do not give up hope. Keep the fire alive. We remember, and we can overcome. Amen. I'd like to invite forward our very own mayor, who just arrived.
Thank you, Jordan. Good evening. I want to echo those words of using tenacious inspiration to do the work that is necessary as a community to deal with what is a community crisis and epidemic. It is, as been mentioned, so encouraging and important that we're all here together tonight, and that we've come together in recognition of Overdose Awareness Day, which is tomorrow, as you know, August 31st, and National Recovery Month in September, to remember those who have been taking us from this horrific epidemic. Each life is lost to overdose, as we know, is a tragedy, and each life lost has left a heartbreak within our families and a hole in our community. And I'd submit none of us are immune to that, whether it's someone in our families, our neighbors, our friends. We've all been impacted in one way or another. And as we honor the lives of our departed, we are also here to embrace those left behind, as been mentioned, and to support and comfort and lend a shoulder to them. So we are here to state loudly and clearly that we are not only united in that determination to fight this disease, but also to continue to fight the stigma so wrongly placed on those affected by this health crisis. Each of us here knows that addiction is a disease that, like many other chronic health conditions, can strike anywhere. It does not discriminate. And each of us knows all too well how difficult this epidemic is to fight. But what many who are not here need to know is that the opioid and overdose crisis impacts all of us, whether we realize it or not. And we must continue to work together to lift the stigma, to raise awareness that this epidemic can impact any home, and most of all, that as a society and a nation, we must unite to end it. As been mentioned, this memorial gathering is just one part of what we are attempting to do as a community in a city. But tonight we'll leave aside the list of programs and actions, because tonight is, as been stated, is about remembering and reflecting and bringing awareness again to this epidemic. And tonight we're raising that awareness right in our community's front yard, right in front and place in this civic center. As Jordan mentioned, on behalf of the community, we're lighting up City Hall purple and placing all 157 individual flags and our larger collective flag right in City Hall's front yard on the concourse. We place these flags so that all who see them may remember and learn from them and reflect and gain strength from one another. Each represents one of our Somerville neighbors, a family member or friend who have lost their lives since 2000, and the larger flag is all for those lost before. It is overwhelming for me to see so many flags and to hear that number of what we've lost in 1 year, and I know how many unique and loved souls they represent, and surely it will be to others as well. So in this way, collectively, these flags, these lives, are a clarion call to the community that the crisis is not just out in the news somewhere, but right here at home, right in our neighborhood, streets and blocks, in our lives and in our city. So we will be leaving the flags and ribbons up all week. I hope you join us by putting purple in your front yard, those of you here and those of you at home who are watching, and encouraging others to do so as well. And as you do so, work with us, stand with us, and move forward with us to continue the fight. We know that one overdose death is one too many, and we will not stop until we can put an end to this epidemic. As Dr. Martin Luther King said, take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. We thank you for coming out this evening. Allow me to introduce the award for Alderman, Mr. Jesse Klingon.
Good evening, folks. I just want to thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening to this very important event. I also want to thank everybody involved in planning this event. My colleague on the board, Alderman at Large Stephanie Hirsch, Mayor Curtatone and his staff, as well as some very dedicated community members like Joanne Ravicchio. I also want to applaud some of the ongoing work from some of our great local organizations for their efforts to address this crisis right here in Somerville. Somerville Overcoming Addiction, the Ryan Harrington Foundation, as well as the Alex Foster Foundation. But lastly, and certainly not least, I'd like to thank our first responders in the Somerville Police Department, the Somerville Fire Department, and our EMTs who are on the front lines of this crisis every day, saving countless lives. Thanks to their willingness to carry Narcan, naloxone, also known as Narcan, long before many other cities. Somerville led the way, so I'm really proud of that. Naloxone remains our single most powerful tool in preventing opioid overdose deaths. So thank you all. And then just briefly, before we begin placing these flags, I'd just like to take a brief moment to tell you a little bit about International Overdose Awareness Day. International Overdose Awareness Day takes place on August 31st, which is tomorrow. It originated in Melbourne, Australia back in 2001. Sally Finn, a manager at a local Salvation Army needle exchange program, she was touched by the sorrow she observed among friends and families of those who had overdosed. She witnessed their inability to express that sorrow because of the stigma surrounding people who use drugs. Finn decided to organize an event of remembrance to commemorate those who had died from overdose. Finn had the idea of distributing ribbons. She thought she'd need 500. She gave out 6,000. Miss Finn's event has evolved into International Overdose Awareness Day, which is now celebrated around the world. Its global significance reflects the universality of human emotions triggered by the tragedy of overdose, a tragedy, and this is something I want everyone to remember when they leave here, that is 100% preventable. Last year, almost 500 events were held across the world, and in 2018, thanks to cities like Somerville, Boston, Cambridge who are joining this effort, it should break that record. The aim of International Overdose Awareness Day is to raise awareness of overdose and reduce the stigma related to drug-related death. It's also an opportunity to stimulate discussion about evidence-based overdose prevention and drug policy. This day acknowledges the grief felt by families and friends remembering those who have died or suffered permanent injury due to drug overdose, and spread the message about the tragedy of drug overdose death and that drug overdose is preventable. I'm extremely proud to live in a city that is willing to participate in this event. Somerville has chosen to participate in International Overdose Awareness Day by lighting up City Hall purple and by placing 157 flags on the lawn near City Hall. 156 flags representing the 156 residents that have died from opioid overdose since 2000, including 21 young people under the age of 24 between 2000 and 2005. Fatal overdoses are now the leading cause of death for people under 50 in the United States. Every single one of those flags represents somebody's son, daughter, mother, father, friend, neighbor, etc. People who are so much more than their disease. People like Frank Ravicchio, people like Alex Foster, and people like Ryan Harrington, and so on. For me, these flags represent too many friends who have died from this deadly disease. But I will not let, and many of us out there will not let their deaths be in vain, and that's why we hold vigils and events like International Overdose Awareness Day. And for too many of us, International Overdose Awareness Day is a day of grieving for those we have lost, but it's also a day of hope, in recognition of the tens of thousands of lives that have been saved from overdose, and a call to further action to end this overdose crisis. We will not end this overdose crisis until we place people who use drugs, along with their families and friends, at the center of our policies and strategies. We do this by ensuring that people who use drugs and their loved ones have access to information, tools, and support without judgment, stigma, or fear of arrest. Somerville has been great in leading on this issue with the CORE program, thanks to Patty Contente and Somerville Police Department. We're taking a harm reduction approach and helping people get into treatment rather than locking people up. But as citizens, we must keep doing more. If you know an active user, get yourself trained on Narcan. Talk to them openly about safe use practices, like doing a test shot and not using alone. We can't bury our heads in the sand and hope for the best. There is lots of good information out there. We don't have to accept what our loved ones are doing, but we can still take a harm reduction approach to keep them safe and alive, because there is no recovery in death. Now let us place these flags and grieve for those who we've lost without shame or stigma. These are your sons, your daughters, your friends, your neighbors. This is a time to remember, but it's also a time to act. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And with that, I'd like to lead everybody over to, if you have a loved one or you just want to place a flag for somebody you knew or just want to place a flag in general, Doug Kress has done an amazing job at pre-drilling holes in the lawn over here for these flags. And there are 156 for the individuals who have died, and one big flag for those who have not been counted. You know, data collection on these issues is really kind of fuzzy. And a lot of people feel also like there's people from Somerville who were from here, but maybe they died in another city. So it's really tricky. Matter of fact, there's a funeral for a young man with strong Somerville ties tomorrow. There's a wake up in Woburn, and a young man by the name of, excuse me, I want to say his name, Casey Ortiz, 30 years old. And his family was brave enough to put in his obituary how he died and speak about that. And that's exactly why events like this are so important. That is why I encourage everybody to, stamp out the stigma, and let's put these flags out and remember these folks tomorrow and right through the week. And again, I want to thank you all. So follow me.
As I said, this is for recognition of Overdose Awareness Day, but we are kicking off Recovery Month. September 1st September is Recovery Month. The mayor and the board has put forth a proclamation stating so. And I'd like to just bring Jared up for 1 minute. He's from Moore, Massachusetts, Organizing for Addiction Recovery. Just to really briefly just tell you a little about himself and what he does and what you can get involved with in Recovery Month.
Sure. My name is Jared Owen. I'm a man in recovery, and for me that means I haven't used alcohol or any other drugs in almost 5 years. I was a student at MIT. I used to shop at the Market Basket in Somerville, and I progressed from alcohol to pills to heroin, and I ended up spending 18 months incarcerated. I was lucky to find an organization that I love called MORE, and our mission is to unite people in recovery, families and friends into a collective voice to educate the public about the value of recovery. We educate, we advocate, and we celebrate recovery, which we're going to be doing on September 17th, downtown Boston, starting on City Hall Plaza at 9 a.m. We have our annual Recovery Day that draws more than 1,000 people from across the state. Wonderful speakers, the governor, the attorney general will come out and talk about what they're doing to help the recovery community. And I want to personally thank Jesse. He's been with MORE and Ryan Anderson for longer than I have, so we really appreciate you, Jesse.
She looks like she's on vacation.